So let's look at some different stories in the Bible, because I just fed you a lot of information and it may not make perfect sense, but I'm going to show you in Bible stories why this was important, why it's important to understand that people didn't think of terms in terms of, if I don't fulfill my dreams, I'm oppressed. Okay? Let's look at Sarah. What was Sarah? Sarah was the wife of Abraham. Sarah was the matriarch of a great clan. Sarah's role in life would be to fulfill that matriarch role and to provide an heir for Abraham. That was the role. That was where she would be seen. That is where she would be judged. That is where she would find her self-esteem, self-worth. This is where she would judge herself based on this paradigm that that's what women do. Those were the assigned gender roles. So Sarah was the matriarch. She was at the top of her world, but she was barren. She did not have a child. So although she could do her job as a wife, she was not able to do her job as a mother. She was not able to fulfill the role that all women were called to as being a mother and as providing an heir to the family. So what does she do? She goes to Hagar, her maidservant, in order to fulfill her role. Okay, this was not a love connection between Hagar and Abraham. This was Sarah fulfilling her role and going to Hagar and saying, I need an heir so that I can fulfill this role. Okay, so I can be doing what society tells me I need to be doing. Now, let's look at this from Hagar's point of view, because a lot of women go, Hagar was turned into a sex slave. No way. Let's look at this from Hagar's dyadic point of view. Hagar's position in the dyadic community, her dyadic social identity, was as a slave. As a slave, the best she could hope for in life was to marry another slave or marry some rich caravan owner who comes by, which wasn't going to happen. And she knew it. She had no romantic ideas, believe me. Romantic ideas are also modern. These people were very practical. They were, like I said, they lived in the present. They didn't live in possible futures. They lived in the present and in the past. So she was a slave. Someone might marry her to another slave, and she may give birth to slaves. Not great, but she would have accepted it as her God-given role in life. So Sarah comes in and offers to change Hagar's role and function. She is offering to make her the mother of the heir of the clan. Hagar would say, okay, down here, down here isn't looking so good anymore. I have been offered up here. Okay, still a slave, only a concubine, not a wife, but the biological mother to the heir of Abraham. Okay, that is a higher honor status in the clan. She would have jumped at the chance. It was beyond her wildest dreams. Sex wasn't about romance back then. Women weren't polluted with these movies and the romance literature of the last 800 years. Okay, so like I said, this is very, very new. Very, very new. Hagar would have been looking at a role improvement. And she would have been looking at having a better role to function in and be judged in. She would have taken it. It would have been great for her. All right? And we know this because now she's in this role, and when she gets pregnant, she starts exalting herself against Sarah. Why? Because she didn't know what the limitations of her role was. Okay? She was a concubine, but she was also the mother of the heir. You know, that wasn't going on anywhere else in the tribe. Even though it was done in the ancient Near East a lot, Hagar had to figure out where she fit into the social situation, and she was depending on others to tell her where she fit in. So she tested the waters, and she exalted herself over Sarah to see if the mother of the heir is over the barren childless matriarch. This is why Sarah went to Abraham and said, this be on you. You got her pregnant. Now she's exalting herself over me. And he said, do whatever you want with her. She's your servant. So right there, Abraham, the patriarch of the clan, defined Hagar's status. She's still a servant. So now Hagar has to function as a servant even though she is the mother-to-be of the heir of the tribe. Without people telling Hagar what her role was and what her expectations are and how to function in that role, she didn't know. She stepped out of line. That's how dyadic social groups work. All right, let's look at Rebekkah. A lot of women, they have a problem with Abraham's servant going out to get a wife for Isaac. And she, the servant goes, he meets Rebekkah at the well, she's getting water, and he puts a nose ring in her nose and a bracelet on her, bling. And she runs home. Laban sees the gold and he goes running back to the well. Well, they bring the servant up. He explains why he is there. And they say, it's up to her. So we've got Rebekkah. She was living in, a community where she was a daughter and a sister. And she had the role and functions in the family of a daughter and sister. Guy comes in with 10 camels loaded with bling and offers her the matriarch position. Remember, Sarah's dead. Okay? Offers her the matriarch, and Abraham did have other wives, but, they were being sent away. Those children were being sent away when they were growing. When they were grown, sorry. So Isaac was going to be the heir to, Mr. 10 camels worth of what I can spare to send for a bride price. She would be the matriarch of great house, with the duties of a matriarch, with the role and functions of a matriarch, and including being the mother to the next heir of the family. She wasn't thinking, is he cute? Is he going to be nice to me? Am I going to love him? Are we going to have a romantic life? No, she was looking at role. Okay? She was looking at where she would fit into a society, and over here, who knows where she was going to marry? She may marry another shepherd. Just some regular old Joe Schmo. But here, she is offered the role of a lifetime. She takes it. There was no way she wasn't going to take it. Okay? These people didn't live with romantic ideas. They weren't thinking about the future. In the present, she was offered the world on a platter as far as she was concerned. Unless a king wandered through, which, she didn't have any sights on happening. They think of the present. They think of the past. They're not dreaming about the future. They're in the now. They're very practical. Okay, this was the chance of a lifetime for Rebekkah. She went. And need I say that being Laban's sister was probably no real joy. Okay. Let's see. Rachel. Again, Rachel was the beloved wife. And modern women look at that and say, okay, let Leah have the kids. You got your husband's love. Isn't that better? No. Because dyadic people aren't looking for love. Dyadic people are looking for contentment and worth in the assigned gender roles. And Rachel was not fulfilling her assigned gender role because she was barren. And so again, we have the situation with the handmaidens, Bilhah and Zilpah, taken as concubines to provide Rachel with progeny. And then when Leah stopped bearing children, and when she saw that Rachel in her eyes was going even higher in the social status, then she retaliated by increasing her social role by also giving her husband the same thing that Rachel had given her husband, which was more heirs through a surrogate. This was all about social expectations and about fulfilling your role and being the best in your role. Okay? Being what people need you to be. And Bilhah and Zilpah, again, they went from being the kinds of people who would maybe give birth to slaves, if they were given in marriage at all, to being mothers of the heirs to a great man. There was no question. There was no question. They were offered a better role. They were offered greater honor within the family unit. They were going to go for it. They weren't oppressed. They weren't sex slaves. This was their choice. But really, they wouldn't have looked at it as a choice. They would have looked at it as a dream come true. It's the way they thought, and we can't call it wrong in retrospect just because we live differently. Their families worked better than ours did. We got to remember that before we get uppity. Hannah, the mother of Samuel, prophet Samuel, same thing. I used to think, oh my gosh, how could Hannah give up her only son Samuel? But her husband had another wife. Elkanah had another wife named Peninnah, and we presume it is for the same reason why the patriarchs took concubines, because men needed heirs. You needed somebody to pass the land down to. You needed somebody to bury you and take care of you in your old age. It was incredibly important. Incredibly important. They were very stressed out at the thought of not being properly buried or being avenged if dishonored. Very important. So Elkanah had gotten a second wife, Peninnah, because he needed an heir and Hannah was barren. And so he says this most bonehead male line in scripture. I mean, it only makes sense to modern women. Okay, he says, well, yeah, but I love you. Isn't that better than 10 sons? Yeah, honey, you're my wildest dreams. I couldn't possibly want to, be perceived as a complete woman in this society because, yeah, you love me best. Yippee. I mean, we look at that and say, okay, let Peninnah have the kids and the stretch marks and everything. But Hannah, as long as she was childless, she was not fulfilling her role in society. She was failing her husband. She was not a whole woman. I can't emphasize it enough. How being barren, and being barren feels bad enough now. Believe me, I know. Just from the emotional standpoint. But when your role in society is gender-based, and your sense of worth comes from being a mom, a big part of your, of your fitting into the community and doing your job in the community comes from fulfilling your function as a mom, and you're not a mom. That's a big deal. So, I wanted to, did I mention Deborah? I wanted to mention Deborah. Deborah is referred to as the wife of Lapidote. Okay, and sometimes people have problems with that. Well, why doesn't she stand on her own? Because nobody stood on their own. Excuse me. Why was Peter the son of Jonah? Why was Yeshua the son of David? Why was everyone referred to as son of or wife of? Because in a dyadic society, you have no meaning apart from your social group. And that is also why exile was such a powerful weapon in the ancient world. When you were exiled from where you belonged, from your family group, from your tribe, from your people, it meant you had no identity anymore. Okay, you couldn't just go somewhere and be part of somebody else's social group. Okay, Paul, when he identified himself, he didn't say, I'm Paul, who I've planted 12 churches this year, and I've preached the gospel all over the world, to the Jew first, and then to the Gentile, and I've done this and I've done that. No, when Paul describes himself primarily as, I'm Paul of Tarsus. So he's identifying himself by his city, which was no mean city. So he's bragging about the city he came from. And he's talking about Hebrew of Hebrew, a Pharisee. So that's a dyadic group. That's a chosen voluntary association where he's part of a whole. Of the tribe of Benjamin. I can't remember if he sat at the feet of Gamaliel. So when Paul identifies himself, he identifies himself in terms of relationship. And that's also why when Paul talks about the ecclesia, the congregation, he talks about in terms of a body. Bodies are all interconnected and every cell has its function. That's why they talked in these terms. If you look at the letters of Paul, a lot of it, and also a lot of things that Yeshua said, a lot of it is in terms of dyadic social identity. These people did not exist as individuals. If someone was stranded on a desert island by themselves, and they were a dyadic person, they would probably die. Because they just wouldn't be able to psychologically function, whereas we might go crazy, but we'd survive. And if we survived with a soccer ball, we could put a handprint on it and talk to it. That's actually probably what a dyadic person would do if they had a soccer ball. Let's just forget I said that. But I want you, importantly, to stop looking at Bible people as though they should have thought the way we think. They didn't. We have to accept that in order to learn from them, in order to properly see what they're saying and where they're coming from, we need to understand what they're thinking. I want to tell you about a few books. It took me about reading five different sociology, ancient Near Eastern, first century sociology books before this finally clicked with me. So if you don't get it, don't worry about it. Just keep thinking about it. So we've got Jerome Nere, The Social World, the New Testament. We've also got Nere's Honor and Shame in the book, in the Gospel of Matthew. Jerome Nere's Social World of Luke through Acts. David De Silva's Honor, Patronage, Kinship, and Purity. Bruce Molina's The New Testament World. I also have different articles that I've read, but this is an incredibly worthy area of study. I hope that maybe I've given you a glimpse as to why the women in ancient Israelite society in first century would not have seen themselves as oppressed. And as a matter of fact, the laws that were handed down by God to Moses honored women and protected women in society and affirmed their roles, gave them worth and dignity. Okay, now I'm not going to say women weren't oppressed anywhere, because in a lot of places, man, you file for divorce, they throw you off a tall building. No, I did not make that up. It's really bad. But when we look at it in terms of how they viewed the social world, a lot of the law makes sense. A lot of Yeshua's teachings and Paul's teachings make a lot more sense. It was how they viewed the world. It wasn't wrong. It was just different. We need to put ourselves in their mindset. We don't dare inflict our mindset on them and say they should have thought that way. The truth was they didn't. So it doesn't matter if they should have. We need to look at it from their point of view, not our own. Or we're going to look at them and we are going to cast all sorts of judgments, not only upon the Bible, but God's laws and God himself. God isn't the problem. Our problem is in assuming that individualistic attitudes have always existed, and even that they're the best way to think. They're just the way we think. You see how great our society's doing. We don't even like to, you look on social media and you look, everyone's their own preacher and everyone has their own theology. No one wants to come together as a body unless it's under their banner. And I struggle with it too, because I'm an individual. I'm very individualistic and I'm having to learn to think in different ways. I think that's the next phase of growth in the body of Messiah. is coming together as as kind of an amalgam, taking the good parts of individualism and the good parts of dyadic society and going forward as a body into the millennial reign, which will hopefully happen soon, but isn't going to happen this month. Too many things need to happen first. Anyway, y'all take care and have a wonderful weekend.